The end of 2024 brought a terrible tragedy to South Korea. On December 30th, the country watched in horror as Jeju Air Flight 2216, flying from Bangkok to Muan, crashed on the runway at Muan International Airport. The Boeing 737-800 carrying 179 people turned from a symbol of hope into a fiery wreck. Almost everyone died, except for 2 flight attendants. This disaster shocked the entire country and the world, becoming South Korea's worst plane crash in almost 30 years. The flight, which left the busy city of Bangkok, carried many different families coming home from vacations, people starting new journeys, and the crew doing their jobs. As Flight 2216 got close to Muan, everyone was excited to land. No one knew their trip would end so suddenly, just moments from the runway. At about 2:54 p.m. local time, a scary Mayday call came through to the air traffic control tower. The pilot's voice, full of worry, reported a serious problem: the landing gear wouldn't work. This news was quickly sent to emergency services, and firefighters, paramedics, and rescue teams raced to the runway. Even though the pilot tried very hard, the damaged plane couldn't land safely and hit the ground with a terrible force. People watching were horrified as the plane skidded down the runway, its metal bottom scraping against the concrete. Sparks and debris flew everywhere as the plane finally stopped, a broken mess. After the crash, the burned remains of Flight 2216 became a symbol of the country's sadness and the search for answers. Investigators, wanting to know what happened, started working at the crash site. The destruction was so bad that it made their careful work very difficult. Finding the black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder (CVR) and flight data recorder (FDR) was the most important thing. These boxes held the clues to understanding the crash. The CVR was found in pretty good shape, and it gave investigators a recording of the flight's last moments. The pilots' voices, calm at first, became more and more desperate as they tried to deal with the emergency. The FDR, however, was badly damaged and had to be sent to the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board for special analysis. This important piece of evidence, once understood, could tell investigators about the plane's systems and if anything went wrong. As the investigation continued, the authorities took quick action. Police searched important places including Muan Airport, Jeju Air's Seoul office, and the regional aviation office, looking for proof of any mistakes. The experienced investigators looked at several things: the possibility of a bird hitting the landing gear, a concrete barrier near the runway, and any mechanical problems that might have caused the crash. The investigation became even more serious when travel bans were placed on important people at Jeju Air. CEO Kim Il-bai and another high-ranking official became part of the investigation, facing possible charges of causing death by negligence. If found guilty, they could go to jail for up to 5 years, or pay a large fine of 20 million won. This shocked South Korea's aviation industry and reminded everyone of the huge responsibility that comes with keeping people safe on airplanes. The crash of Flight 2216 deeply affected South Korea. The entire country felt sadness and disbelief. As news of the disaster spread, people everywhere were shocked and horrified. The tragedy was especially sad because it happened during the New Year's holiday, a time for celebration and looking back on the year. Instead, the country felt a huge sense of loss and sadness. President Choi Sang-mok, clearly upset by the disaster, spoke to the nation with a heavy heart. He told the families of those who died that he was very sorry and promised the government would help them. President Choi also ordered an immediate and complete safety check of all airplanes in South Korea. This was to make sure a similar tragedy would never happen again. He especially wanted the landing gear of all 101 Boeing 737-800 planes used by 6 domestic airlines to be carefully checked. The crash site, a sad reminder of how fragile life is, became a place for grieving families to visit. Relatives of the victims, many traveling long distances, gathered at the wreckage, their faces showing pain and disbelief. They left flowers, pictures, and traditional gifts near the crash site, saying silent goodbyes to their loved ones. The air was filled with the smell of incense and the sound of quiet crying, a heartbreaking scene of lives tragically ended too soon. The sadness was felt all across South Korea. Memorials were set up in public areas, churches, and temples, giving people a place to mourn together. People lit candles, prayed, and left messages. The country, united in its grief, showed great strength and kindness, supporting the families who lost someone and demanding answers from those responsible for keeping air travel safe. The crash of Jeju Air Flight 2216 brought back painful memories for South Korea, a country that has experienced plane crashes before. This tragedy reminds us of the dangers of flying and how important safety rules are. While South Korea has had a pretty good aviation safety record lately, past accidents are still remembered. This crash reminds people of the Korean Air Flight 801 crash in 1997, where 228 people died when the plane hit a hillside while trying to land in Guam. That tragedy, caused by pilot error and poor training, led to big changes in South Korea's aviation industry. They focused on improving safety, making stricter rules, and watching airlines more closely. This seemed to work, as there were no major accidents for many years. But this recent disaster makes people wonder if those changes were enough, and if everyone became too relaxed about safety. The investigation into Flight 2216 will likely take a long time and be complicated. The authorities promise to look at everything to find out the truth. The information from the black boxes, once fully understood, will probably tell us what happened leading up to the crash. The South Korean government is under pressure to fix any problems in the aviation industry and make it even safer. The public wants to know that everything possible is being done to prevent another tragedy. The families of the victims, dealing with terrible loss, deserve answers and justice for their loved ones. The crash of Flight 2216 reminds us that even today flying, while statistically safe, can still be dangerous.